The police told me the house was empty when they arrived, but the Christmas music was still playing, the fire was still warm, and someone had written Merry Christmas on the bathroom mirror. From the inside. That's the part they never explain. Every December we tell ourselves the same lie. That Christmas is safe. That the lights mean comfort. That the snow softens everything. That bad things take the night off because it's a holiday. But the truth is darker. And law enforcement knows it better than anyone. Because some of the most disturbing cases they've ever touched happened when families were supposed to be together, doors were supposed to be locked, and evil was supposed to be impossible. This is one of those stories. It started with a welfare check on Christmas Eve. A routine call. No screams. No alarms. Just a neighbor complaining that the car hadn't moved all day, and the porch light had been on since morning. When officers arrived, the front door was unlocked. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. Just silence, thick, unnatural silence, broken only by a looping Christmas song playing softly from a living room speaker. The tree was still lit. Presents were still wrapped. Dinner had been prepared, and never eaten. And upstairs, in a house filled with warmth and decorations, something had already gone terribly wrong. Police would later say there were no footprints in the snow leading away from the home. None leading toward it either. No fingerprints that made sense. No signs of anyone leaving in a hurry. It was as if the people inside had simply stopped existing mid-celebration, while the holiday carried on without them. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what officers found that didn't belong. Because when detectives checked the rooms, they noticed something subtle at first. Small details. Things slightly out of place. Ornaments rearranged. Stockings moved from where the family had hung them just hours earlier. A single gift, unlabeled, placed beneath the tree that no one could explain. And then there was the mirror. Fogged slightly from a recent shower. Still warm to the touch. With those two words written clearly across it. Merry Christmas. No fingerprints. No explanation. Just a message left behind by someone who had been comfortable enough to take their time. After everything was already over. Cases like this don't make sense. Not to police. Not to profilers. Not to anyone who needs the world to follow rules. Because Christmas crimes don't follow patterns. They don't feel rushed. They feel deliberate. Almost ceremonial. As if the date itself matters. And this wasn't the only one. There's the case of the patrol officer who responded to a silent alarm at a closed mall on Christmas night, only to find fresh boot prints in the snow that stopped abruptly in the middle of the parking lot. No return tracks. No vehicles. Just an abandoned radio playing carols inside a security office that hadn't been staffed for hours. There's the unsolved disappearance of a family who vanished during a blizzard, while neighbors watched their lights turn on and off for days afterward. Police searched the home repeatedly. Found nothing. Yet every Christmas since, someone resets the decorations. And then there's the one case detectives refused to talk about at all. The one involving a child's 911 call placed at 12:01 a.m. on Christmas morning. The call lasted 7 seconds. Long enough for the operator to hear breathing. Long enough to hear footsteps. Long enough to hear a voice whisper, "He's here." The number traced back to a house that had burned down 10 years earlier. Christmas is supposed to be loud, joyful, full of people. But these stories share the same detail. Silence where there shouldn't be any. Homes that feel staged. Scenes that look finished. Like whoever was responsible didn't panic, didn't rush, and didn't make mistakes. Police closed the files. The cases went cold. And the holiday kept coming back every year. But if you look closely, at the reports, the evidence logs, the details buried in footnotes, you start to notice something chilling. A pattern not in who disappeared, but when. Because whatever happened in those homes didn't just happen on Christmas. It waited for it. And that should make you wonder something very uncomfortable tonight. When the lights are on, the music is playing, and everyone believes they're safe. Who notices when something that doesn't belong decides to join the celebration? Before any of this happened, my life was quiet in the most ordinary way possible. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 34 at the time, working as a junior claims investigator for an insurance company in the Midwest. It wasn't exciting work. Mostly paperwork, follow-up calls, and long days staring at reports that blurred together by the end of the week. But it paid the bills, and it gave me something I valued more than excitement: routine. That December routine was exactly what I needed. It was December 23rd, just after 7 p.m., when I arrived at my parents' house for Christmas. Snow dusted the neighborhood in a thin, quiet layer, softening the edges of everything: lawns, rooftops, even the streetlights. The world looked smaller somehow, gentler. Like nothing bad could happen under that much white. My parents lived in a modest 2-story home on a cul-de-sac where everyone knew each other's names. The kind of place where packages could sit on porches all day without disappearing. Where the loudest sound at night was usually a distant dog barking or a car door closing down the block. Inside, the house smelled like pine and cinnamon. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner of the living room, lights blinking softly in reds and golds. Ornaments I remembered from childhood hung from the branches: glass bells, hand-painted figurines, a crooked star my sister and I had made years ago. Everything felt familiar, comforting. I dropped my bag by the stairs and took off my coat, letting the warmth soak into my shoulders. Christmas music played quietly from the kitchen radio, just loud enough to be present without demanding attention. My mom hummed along as she cooked. My dad sat at the dining table scrolling through his phone, pretending not to sneak tastes of the cookies cooling nearby. I felt calm, genuinely calm. There were no deadlines here. No emails. No case files waiting to be reviewed. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't racing. I poured myself a mug of hot chocolate and stood by the window, watching the snow drift down in slow, lazy spirals. Outside, the street was peaceful. Houses glowed with warm light. Inflatable snowmen leaned slightly in the cold. A neighbor across the street waved as he finished hanging lights along his porch railing. It felt like a postcard, perfect, staged, safe. That night, after dinner, I helped my parents wrap the last of the presents. We laughed at how bad my dad was at folding corners. We talked about nothing important: weather, travel plans, which movie we'd watch on Christmas Eve. Normal things. Harmless things. Around 10:30 p.m. my parents went to bed, leaving me alone downstairs. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. I stretched out on the couch, blanket pulled up to my chest, the tree lights casting soft shadows across the walls. The house settled around me with gentle creaks and pops as it always did when the heat kicked on. Familiar sounds. Reassuring sounds. The kind you stop noticing when you've lived somewhere long enough. I remember thinking how nice it felt to be somewhere that didn't ask anything of me. Somewhere predictable. Somewhere I didn't have to be alert or suspicious or on guard. Before turning in for the night, I double-checked the doors out of habit. Not from fear, just routine. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows secure. Everything exactly as it should be. When I finally turned off the living room lights and headed upstairs, the only illumination left came from the Christmas tree, glowing softly in the darkness. It made the house feel alive, warm, occupied. Safe. As I lay in bed, listening to the distant hum of the heater and the faint music still playing downstairs, I felt something rare and valuable: certainty. The certainty that nothing unexpected would happen tonight. That Christmas would be like every other one before it. And that belief, the quiet confidence that nothing bad could touch us here, was the most dangerous thing in the house. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. for no clear reason. No noise I could point to. No nightmare lingering in my thoughts. Just that sudden sharp awareness, like someone had flipped a switch inside my chest and pulled me out of sleep. The house was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet you only notice when you're fully awake in the middle of the night. For a few seconds I lay still, listening. The heater hummed softly through the vents. Somewhere downstairs, the Christmas music had stopped, leaving behind a hollow silence that felt louder than sound. I told myself it was nothing. People wake up at night all the time. Then I heard it. A faint creak from below. Not the familiar pop of settling wood. Not the rhythmic click of pipes. This sound had weight to it, slow and deliberate, like pressure being shifted from one surface to another. I held my breath. The house went still again. "Dad." I called out quietly, already feeling a little silly. No answer. I listened harder, straining past the hum of the heater, past my own breathing. After a moment I relaxed. Old houses made noise. That was all. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes. Another sound. This time it came from the staircase. A soft tap, followed by a pause. Then another. My stomach tightened, not with fear yet but with confusion. The steps were spaced too evenly. Too careful. like someone testing each one before committing their weight. I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off my legs. The air in the room felt colder than it had earlier, brushing against my skin in a way that made me shiver. "Mom," I whispered. Still nothing. The tapping stopped. Seconds passed. Then more. Long enough for my pulse to slow again, long enough for logic to creep back in and tell me I was overreacting. I stood and cracked my bedroom door open just enough to see the hallway. The nightlight near the stairs glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the carpet. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But the feeling didn't go away. It sat in the back of my mind like a low static hum, the unmistakable sensation of being observed. Not watched openly. Watched quietly. Like eyes resting on you from somewhere just out of sight. I told myself it was my imagination and stepped into the hallway. As I did, I noticed something small but wrong. The smell. Earlier, the house had smelled like pine and baked sugar. Now there was something else layered beneath it. Faint, metallic, and cold. Like the air before a storm, except there was no storm outside. I moved toward the stairs, each step slow, deliberate. Halfway down, I paused. The Christmas tree lights were still on. They hadn't been earlier. I was sure of it. A soft glow pulsed from the living room, spilling into the hallway in gentle waves of red and gold. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt staged. As if the house were trying a little too hard to look the way it was supposed to. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there listening. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No voices. Just that same heavy quiet, pressing in from all sides. Then from somewhere near the living room, I heard a soft rustling sound. Paper. The slow crinkle of something being handled carefully. My heart thumped once, harder than before. "Hello," called louder now. The sound stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt attentive. Like whatever had been moving had noticed me. I took another step forward and glanced toward the couch. The throw blanket I'd been using earlier was folded neatly on the armrest. I hadn't done that. I remembered leaving it in a heap where I'd fallen asleep. A chill crept up my spine. I stood very still, listening for any sign of movement, any explanation that would let this all make sense. That's when I realized something else had changed. The front window, usually fogged slightly from the cold, was perfectly clear. And in its reflection, just for a moment, I thought I saw movement behind me. I turned quickly. There was nothing there. But the feeling remained. The feeling that the house was no longer empty. And that whatever had entered wasn't lost, wasn't confused, and wasn't in a hurry. It was waiting. I didn't hear it enter the room. That was the first thing that made me understand this wasn't just fear or imagination anymore. 1 second I was standing alone at the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding, staring into the living room. The next, the air changed, thickened almost, as if the space behind me had been occupied by something heavy. I felt it before I saw it. The pressure in my chest increased, my breath suddenly shallow and fast. Every instinct in my body screamed the same warning. Don't move. The Christmas lights flickered. Not all at once, just one strand, then another, dimming slightly before glowing again. The soft, cheerful colors now looked sickly, unnatural. Shadows stretched along the walls in ways that didn't match the light source. And then I heard breathing. Not from the vents. Not from upstairs. Right behind me. Slow. Controlled. Too steady to be accidental. I turned. Standing at the edge of the living room, partially illuminated by the tree, was a figure that did not belong in that house. It was tall, taller than my father, yet unnaturally thin, like its proportions were wrong. Its shoulders sloped forward. Its head angled slightly to one side as if it were studying the room or me. It didn't rush. It didn't react to being seen. It just stood there. The smell hit me next. Stronger now. Metallic and damp. Like cold iron and wet fabric left too long in the dark. My legs refused to move. "Dad," I tried to say again, but the word barely made it past my throat. The figure took a step forward. The floorboard beneath it creaked. Not loudly, but enough to confirm it was real. Solid. Present. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. This wasn't a person. I knew that with a certainty so sharp it felt like pain. Whatever stood in front of me didn't move like a person. Its step wasn't a step so much as a shift, as if gravity itself pulled it forward without effort. The house felt smaller. the walls closer. The warmth I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a biting cold that crawled across my skin. The figure tilted its head further. And then it smiled. Not a human smile. No warmth, no expression. Just a slow stretching of something that resembled a mouth, revealing darkness inside where teeth should have been. That was the moment fear became urgency. I backed away instinctively, my heel catching on the edge of the rug. The movement seemed to interest it. Its head straightened. The breathing changed, deeper now, almost eager. I realized then that it hadn't been wandering the house. It had been waiting. I turned and ran. My foot slipped on the hardwood, and I barely caught myself as I sprinted toward the kitchen. The sound of my own movement shattered the silence, echoing far too loudly in the quiet house. Behind me something moved. Fast. Not charging. Not chasing in panic, but closing the distance with terrifying efficiency. I could hear it now. The soft drag of fabric or skin against the floor. The faint scrape of something brushing walls that had never been meant to be touched that way. I reached the kitchen and grabbed the first thing I could, a chair. Swinging it blindly behind me. It hit nothing. But the impact jolted my arms, and in that instant, I felt a presence pass close enough that the air shifted beside my face. Cold brushed my cheek. I screamed. The lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the kitchen into darkness for a split second before snapping back on. When they did, the figure was no longer in the doorway. Panic flooded me. It was inside the house. And it was moving freely. I realized with a sickening clarity that whatever this was, it wasn't breaking in. It had been invited in. And now that it had revealed itself, the house was no longer a place of safety. It was a trap. And I was running out of time. I bolted for the back door. My feet slapped against the tile as adrenaline drowned out everything else. Logic, fear, even pain. I could hear it behind me now, not breathing anymore but moving. Fast. Too fast for something that tall, that thin. The sound wasn't footsteps. It was a sliding rush like fabric dragged across polished wood. The doorknob was cold in my hand. I twisted. Locked. Of course it was locked. Something slammed into the counter behind me hard enough to rattle the cabinets. A glass shattered. I spun, heart exploding in my chest, and saw it. Closer now, half lit by the flickering kitchen light. Its limbs bent at wrong angles, joints shifting as if they weren't fixed in place. It reached out, fingers too long, nails dull and gray like stone. I ducked as they sliced through the air where my head had been. The refrigerator door burst open as I threw myself sideways, milk and containers crashing to the floor. I scrambled, slipped, caught myself on the edge of the table and ran again, this time toward the hallway. My parents' bedroom. If I could get to them, a sound cut me off. A voice. My mother's voice. "Daniel," it called softly from upstairs. I froze mid-step. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. My mom never called me Daniel like that, never that quiet, never that calm. The voice was close, coming from just beyond the staircase, layered wrong, like it didn't belong to the body using it. I ran anyway. Up the stairs, two at a time, lungs burning, legs shaking. I could feel it behind me, feel the pressure of it filling the space, narrowing the distance. A hand brushed my shoulder, ice cold, impossibly strong, and I screamed as I tore free, nearly tumbling forward. I hit my parents' door and shoved it open. The room was empty. Beds untouched. Lights off. No signs they'd ever been there. My stomach dropped. I slammed the door and twisted the lock just as something heavy hit it from the other side. The impact shook the frame, sending a crack spidering through the wood. Again. Harder. I backed away, grabbing the dresser, shoving it against the door as the handle rattled violently. The breathing returned, right on the other side now, slow, patient, confident. It knew I was trapped. I scanned the room desperately. Window. The window. I rushed to it, yanked the curtains aside and shoved the glass up. Cold air blasted in, sharp and clean. Snow-covered lawn below. 2 stories down. No time to think. The door buckled. I climbed onto the sill as wood splintered behind me. The breathing surged, suddenly loud, almost excited. I jumped. I hit the ground hard, pain exploding up my leg. But I rolled and staggered to my feet, sprinting barefoot through the snow. The cold barely registered. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, and the sound of something landing behind me with a wet, heavy thud. I didn't look back. I ran for the neighbor's house, lights blazing, porch glowing like salvation. I slipped on ice, slammed my hands down, scrambled up again. The front door loomed closer. Something grabbed the back of my shirt. The fabric tore as I lunged forward, slamming my fist against the door. I pounded, screamed, sobbed. The door flew open. Warm light spilled out as hands grabbed me, dragged me inside. The door slammed shut behind us. For a split second I thought it was over. Then the lights flickered. And from the other side of the door I heard it breathe. Slow. Steady. Waiting. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later. At least that's what they told me. To me it felt like hours, sitting on my neighbor's couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the glass of water they kept trying to give me. My feet were bleeding. My clothes were torn. I kept staring at the front door, waiting for it to happen again. Waiting for the breathing. When the officers finally stepped inside, their presence brought a fragile sense of reality with them. Radios crackling, boots on hardwood, voices asking calm, practiced questions. I tried to explain everything all at once. The figure. The voice. The room upstairs that wasn't supposed to be empty. They listened. They always do. Then they went to check the house. I watched from the porch as flashlights cut through the windows of my parents' home. Room by room. Floor by floor. The lights stayed on longer upstairs. I could see silhouettes moving slowly, carefully. When they came back out, their expressions had changed. Not fear. Confusion. "There's no one inside," one of them said gently. "No signs of a break-in. No damage to the doors. No footprints in the snow except yours." I stared at him. "That's not possible," I said. "It was there. Chased me. It broke the door." The officer glanced back at the house. "The bedroom door upstairs is intact. No cracks. No marks. Nothing out of place." My stomach twisted. They let me go back inside with them. The house looked normal. Too normal. The kitchen mess was gone. No broken glass. No spilled milk. The living room was tidy. The Christmas tree stood exactly where it had always been. Lights glowing softly, ornaments untouched. The bedroom upstairs, my parents' room, was exactly how it always looked. Bed made. Curtains drawn. No sign anyone or anything had forced their way in. They found my parents' phones on their nightstand, their coats in the closet, their car still in the driveway. But my parents themselves were gone. No signs of struggle. No blood. No evidence of where they'd gone or why they would ever leave without me. Police searched the neighborhood, then the surrounding area, then the woods beyond the cul-de-sac. Dogs found nothing. Cameras showed nothing. No one saw or heard a thing. By morning Christmas Day, the case was already turning cold. They told me trauma could make people imagine things, that grief could fill in gaps, that sometimes people leave on their own. But none of that explained one detail they never put in the report. When an officer went to wipe down the upstairs bathroom mirror, standard procedure, he stopped, called the others in. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. 2 words, faint but unmistakable, smeared across the glass from the inside. "Merry Christmas." No fingerprints. No explanation. The case remains unsolved. My parents were never found. Officially, they're listed as missing. The house was sold. The new owners moved in less than a year later. I don't live there anymore. I don't celebrate Christmas. And sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet and the lights are low, I still wake up with that same crushing feeling in my chest. The sense that the air behind me is heavier than it should be. Last year on Christmas Eve, I found something outside my apartment door. A small, neatly wrapped gift. No tag. No return address. Inside was a single ornament from my parents' tree. The crooked one my sister and I made as kids. And that's when I understood the worst part of all this. Whatever came into that house didn't get what it wanted. And it hasn't stopped looking.